peeps. Thank you for joining us for the first real episode of Flash It in Scholarship. Today with us we have Dr. Cydnee Clark, hailing all the way from Texas, baby. So I'm super excited to have her here. First of all, outside of this world, Cydnee and I talk literally all the time. And if you follow either of us on social media, then you would know that we have done a research project together that we're still kind of like fleshing through. So it was only right for her to be the first guest of the podcast, especially after talking to her so much about this process and like getting it out of my belly into the real world. And so I am so excited to have you. Welcome.
Thank you, friend. Thank you to my dear friend, Dr. Tamisha, for having me. I'm super, super proud of you. And I will hold my tongue until the end of the interview to sing your praises for the sake of time. But just know that I am godly proud of you. And I'm honored to be with you here today as your first guest.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So I've done an introduction, but I'll just kind of like do it again. So Dr. Cydnee, again, is from Houston, Texas. She graduated with her PhD from Pepperdine and had just kind of like been hitting the ground running. So currently she works in public health, but she is also doing some consulting in education. And so today we're going to focus on not only her work in education, but the real topic of the first season is talking about the aspects of code switching. Because I've found that over the past couple of months, I feel like we've just been like hit after hit after hit with finding other scholars like ourselves who are not code switching, who are not afraid to be themselves. And so I just kind of want to talk to you first about your journey with that, especially going to Pepperdine, which is a PWI, and just having as much swag as you have, right? How has that been for you? So just tell me about your experience with code switching.
So when I think about code switching, and I'm sure they will hear it throughout this podcast, I often tell people I am trilingual. Trilingual. I speak African American vernacular first, that is my native tongue. Then I speak Texan, and then standard English. So throughout this podcast, you will hear either of the three at any given time. And I wasn't comfortable giving that spiel until I began my PhD program. During my master's program, I did some research on literacy and literacy engagement and literacy development and the importance thereof, right? And I remember reading an article, and it said specifically about Texans. They said that people often take people from the South who speak with a Southern drawl or just really speak slowly and associate it with ignorance, right? And I was like so offended. I was so offended. Born and raised in Texas, I hear the variation of Texas accents, and I would like to say that I have one, but it's not as thick as others, right? So with that, I started paying attention to, I was a teacher at the time, so I started paying attention to language and hearing teachers talk to students. This was first grade elementary, how they were talking to students using African American vernacular and Texan, right? And I started asking myself, in my master's, I did a research project about it. What is the impact of a teacher not code switching at such a young age, right? At the foundational age of education. Students are not cognizant enough to know that it's almost like an on and off switch, right? So with that lens, and then I knew friends from DC, right? And they would often say mother and father, and I was like, so when the teachers are giving a spelling test and the word is father or mother, like what do they say? Do they say, okay, students, the word is father? Like, how do you spell father? Like, the word is mother.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, okay, so how do you spell mother? Right? That's hitting home for you, right? And so I just started being more aware of what I was saying and how I was saying it in front of my younger students, because I wanted them to be able to show up in the world and articulate and not be judged based on the words that they were saying, right? The academic language and setting is very different than home table talk language.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of where the code switching began for me.
Makes sense. And it's so crazy because I think even in this moment, as I talk, right, in this space, or as if I'm at work and I'm like teaching a class, I find that like speaking sometimes is difficult for me because my natural tongue is similar to you, right? Like I speak DC first and I have to catch myself because it's like, okay, wait a minute. That's not how you pronounce that word in like your standard English. And it's a lot of work. And I don't think people understand how draining it is when you come from a city where like your native language or your native accent is so thick and how much you have to like overdo and overthink, and it almost comes out in like stumbles sometimes where I'm like repeating words or re-saying words because I'm like, well, I understood what I'm saying, or did this person understand what I'm saying? Right, like, and how does that translate? So with that, that was in your master's program, and as you kind of like gone throughout your journey, were you able to carry that personality or that thought into like PhD and in the world of PhD at Pepperdine?
So I think I was very intentional with creating a space at Pepperdine because, like you say, someone, from Texas, Beaumont, Texas, by way of Houston, Texas, and going to Pepperdine, which is a PWI, right? And as swaggy as I am, I was very intentional, again, that research changed my mindset, but I wanted people to understand that regardless of my African American vernacular or my Texan accent, that I am very intelligent, and that the next time that they would be at a table where someone is speaking an African American vernacular or Texan, that they wouldn't judge them and think that they were ignorant or not smart, but really remember me as that person that they sat side by side with and worked on projects with and presentations with, who looked like whomever they were faced in front of.
Yeah.
So in an elementary school setting, as a teacher, I wanted to make sure that I articulated everything right and led by example for the kids, because again, what they were more experiencing more at home was not what they would need to climb per se the economic ladder, right? So while at Pepperdine, again, I began to be more confident, right? Code switching, I think, is associated with I can't think of the term right now, but imposter syndrome, right? And so when you think about imposter syndrome and code switching, oftentimes when you're in these spaces, you begin to code switch heavily because you have imposter syndrome, because you're in your head and you're thinking, oh my God, they're going to judge me because I said mother, because I said father, right? Because that's my native tongue, right? So I was very intentional about that, and I started doing some self-reflection and also understanding that I am deserving of being in this space as well, right? Regardless of where I come from. And again, just using that as a leverage to bridge the gap and cause people to think twice before they judge someone based on their native tongue. I also would like to say that that's why I began all of my presentations. I don't care if I was in front of the dean, the president, whomever of the university with, hi, my name is Cydnee Patterson. I'm from Beaumont, Texas. I speak 3 languages. We would call it trilingual. African American vernacular, Texan, and standard English. You will hear all 3 during this presentation. And so it also kind of broke the ice and caused me to like release the anxiety that I was feeling and the imposter syndrome, because here, take me as I am.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's actually smart, and I don't think I've ever thought of using that as a tool, right? Like the idea of, I don't want to say getting ahead of it because there's nothing to get ahead of, but it's really you breaking down the mental blocks in your mind so that you can just flow, right? I don't think that I've done that or considered that in presentations. Now, when I'm in my classrooms, my accent comes out a lot of times, right? Because I'm my purest. I try to be my purest self in those environments, even though I have to switch a little bit, right? But in presentations, I feel like there's always this gut feeling of like, let me make sure I say this right. Let me make sure I do this right. So your strategy of let me just be honest up front about what you're getting, who I am, and so that way I don't have to overwork in my brain to constantly correct myself. And I think that that's brilliant and so good as a tip, I think, for other people too, who are presenters or speakers or need to get in front of other people who know, like, hey, I'm smart and I'm intelligent, and my accent or my vernacular is not the accents thereof. It's also important, I think, for other educators because there's been plenty of studies that have happened with literacy where they found that Black and brown kids often get labeled as not understanding and lower on reading comprehension when it's really not about that. It's really about the fact that when they're reading something, they're not digesting it and processing it because it's not being processed in their native tongue, right? Whereas if you give them their words or you give them the script in their vernacular or in that's written in their native language, it is much easier for them to process. So I love that you have that tip, and that's something that I'm going to take with me as well. How does it show up for you in your place of work? Because you have, your leader at work. I'm always laughing because I'm like, I can't believe that my friends have like real jobs. Like we're the real adults. So how does it work for you, or how does it impact you at work?
Well, I want to touch on something while it's on my brain
Yeah.
based on a statement that you said before. And in the academic setting, when it comes to Black and brown students, when people think about English language learners, they often always associate it with brown students, not realizing that the same accommodations and modifications that we're making for our brown students can also be made for our Black students. Because ultimately, what we're saying is African American vernacular is an actual language. People may not understand or discredit it, but the research and the data has supported it, and even on some applications it is offered as a language, African American vernacular. So when we're in the classroom, that is a language barrier, and it could be definitely qualified as an English language learner.
Yeah.
Because African American vernacular is very different from the English language. Now, I just wanted to add that
Yeah.
piece before
Okay.
I forgot it. And hopefully, an educator that's listening will also take that into consideration when they're planning their lessons and things of that nature for their
Yeah.
students.
Yeah.
As it pertains to code switching in my workplace, it's very hard as a young leader to not code switch because many of the people that I am supervising are younger than me. I mean, I'm sorry, older than
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
So, one, I have the barrier of me being younger and older people kind of looking at me like not credible, right? She doesn't know what she's talking about. Who does she think she is? And they totally disregard the fact that I do have a PhD and I am Dr. Cydnee Clark. Like, that's a whole nother
Yeah.
topic
Yeah.
for a whole nother day that we can talk about there. But they're my team that I work really closely with, they get to experience all three languages. My broader team only get one version of me
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because I can't afford for them to not adhere to anything that I'm saying or discredit anything that I'm saying or not find it valid for whatever reason, because I feel like being a younger leader, they're literally looking for any and everything to pick you apart at. I already don't fit the status quo when I dress and go to work. I don't go in plain blue and black and a suit and this.
Yeah.
Like, I'm vibrant. Some days I want to wear pink. Some days I might want to wear sneakers with my dress or whatever.
Yeah.
I wear makeup. Some people don't wear makeup. I want to make sure my hair is cute. Like, all these things that, like, when you're working in a certain kind of environment, this goes back to the side.
Yeah.
I always want to be that girl. I am the fashionable PhD.
Yeah. Yeah.
for a reason. It's on
Yeah,
brand.
yeah, very true. It's also crazy to hear you talk about like how, because when we think of code switching, I don't want it to have this full like negative connotation, right? Like, because there is spaces where I believe it's necessary, and solely because we are still living in a society that we live in, right? We still, I feel, right, and this is just a feel statement, that we have to work twice as hard in many of these spaces, right? And some of that can be all in our brain, some of that can be the reality, but to hear you say, you know, even in this one space, right, of your career and of your workplace, there is still needing to be two versions of you, right? There is the version of me that is to my small, close knit team. That's typically probably the people that you're interacting with most. But then there's another version of you that has to show up in the broader setting. And that is real life, right? That is real, real life. And I see the same thing even for myself, that even in the institution, I have to pick and choose like how much dosage of code switching that I want to pour into something in the moment. We're never really ourselves. Like, let's be very clear. At work, in these spaces, we can never truly be the versions of ourselves that call Cydnee in the morning, or, you know, call Cydnee in the afternoon, and we're just talking the way that we talk. We can never be that full version of ourselves. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that, because I do believe that there's a time and a place for different parts of you to show up. But it's, we have to overwork when it comes to code switching. And so to hear you say there's even levels to this, right? Like, I'm still not myself at work, and there's levels to how much code switching I want to do. What do you think is the benefit of code switching? Because I do think there are some benefits, and then I think that there are some cons. In your perspectives, what are the benefits of it?
I think when I think about the actual benefits of the ability to be able to code switch, it's almost like you said, like it's a time and a place for everything. Your parents told you that from your
Yeah.
childhood, right? And in particularly, I'm just really drawn to the classroom experience for those students that are growing up in low socioeconomic disadvantaged areas.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We have to lead by example, especially inside this academic setting, because again, they don't get it outside.
Yeah.
So the pro there is that we are preparing them to be able to do what we're doing, which is code switching. We are preparing them to be able to know that you can be yourself, but there will be times when you often have to code
Yeah.
switch
Yeah.
to get your message across,
Yeah.
right? And it's not, and another thing, it's not even about us really, it's for the person that's on the receiving end.
Mm.
I think that's important too.
Mm-hmm.
But I really just think the positive part is really going back to our educators, laying the foundation for our students and employing them to know how to speak standard English, know how to write properly, you know, and communicate. Because a lot of times what I'm seeing, you know, we have this post COVID data, but even before COVID, texting impacted literacy.
Mm-hmm.
Students weren't able to write incomplete sentences, spell words because they're using T9 verbiage.
Yeah.
So we have to go back to the basics,
Yeah.
which ultimately standard English in America is the basics.
Yeah.
So the positive there, us being able to code switch, is being able to go back and teach the kids the foundation,
Yeah.
the basics, so that they can succeed in life. And again, not for like our peers, but if we have something to say, sometimes you have to be able to speak their language
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
for them to understand.
Yeah, that's a great, great point. I think the way in which you phrase it, it's almost like the benefit of it, from what I'm getting from you, is the survival mechanism, right? And to use it as a sense of survival in a world that's not really structured for young black and brown children. And so, if the world is structured the way that it is, it requires you to figure out how to bust through the seams in some kind of way. And we don't want to lose a sense of ourselves, right? Like, we're not saying we want you to fully assimilate into this world that doesn't really align with who you are at your core. But the benefit of code switching is exactly what you said, the ability to put your yourself in spaces where you have to speak a different language. It's almost like what we're saying about being bilingual or trilingual, right? Like when you put that on the application, that's a good look. Like people are like, oh, vibes, right? Because this person can be multiple people at once. And so the benefit, I think, is we can use code switching as a mechanism for survival in the world or in a society that's very difficult to break through as a Black or brown person. What do you think are some of the cons?
I think about when we started talking about the experience of code switching, I'm drawn to mental health on the con part. Because you said oftentimes we are never really ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
As much as I am African American vernacular is my native tongue, I'm engaged with people. One person in particular last week told me that I always talk email. And I was like, what? And then, I called you and I told you, and you were like, that's because they need to hear you, like, when we're talking.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's like, this very well is somebody that's in my personal life and all the things, but I don't know. Like, I guess my older sister said it best is that I've done it for so long that it's become a part of me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so the part is the scary part is losing sense of self.
Yeah.
Like I am proud to be a Black woman,
Yeah.
who speaks African American vernacular.
Yeah.
And who has obtained this PhD. And you're going to know that I am trilingual, and African American vernacular is first and foremost.
Yeah.
But everybody isn't empowered to stand in that.
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't have the confidence and really stand firm in who you are, you can get lost in all of this. And it could cause you to have mental and spiritual warfare within yourself.
Yeah.
And now you don't know who you are.
Yeah.
Now again, have multiple personalities in a literal sense.
Yeah. Yeah. The shape.
So it's a scary, it's a fine line, and it's really scary, and it's unfortunate for us. Even when we talk about like our research that we're doing around Black women and navigating the institution and hearing some of their stories. Like mental health is big, and we keep hearing like these people not feeling like they can show up as themselves.
Yeah.
And if you show up as yourself, then it's like a demerit against you.
Mm-hmm. 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 Very true. I completely agree with the line of you can get lost in this space if you allow yourself to. And I've seen it in many ways with people, and it sucks because it's like you have a real personality outside of this world, outside of your career. It's especially true for academia, right? Because you're supposed to be aligned with a certain standard and what that looks like. And so I see so many people getting lost in themselves. And for me, it's like I can truly stand and say I love and enjoy what I do, because I allow myself the opportunity for Misha to bleed through a lot of the work that I do. But that was a journey for me. There was a major journey for me. The first couple of years in my job, my first couple of years in my PhD program, I found it very, very difficult to figure out, like, okay, I'm in this space, right? I got my PhD at Catholic University. There was only one other Black girl in my program. But for all intents and purposes, it's like, this is a journey that I'm taking that's very, very difficult for me. And I'm trying to figure out how to let me bleed through and not completely lose myself in this world that just doesn't really align with my personality. I'm not stuffy, right? I don't like maximize a whole bunch of things. Like I'm very go with the flow. Much of that is because I know that I need to be connected to that to stay sane. And these worlds where you are having to produce information, where you have to teach other people things, it's like if you're a presenter, you're supposed to be stuffy, include a little bit of humor and engagement, but make sure you minimize it. But I really think that when people can't find the balance in the code switch and being themselves, it really does impact them, right? Like for me, like you said, I go to work wearing what I want to wear. I keep my nails done all sorts of ways, right? Like hair is done. Yeah, my students said if there was a superlative for best dress, I would win it. Like these are the vibes that I'm bringing to the university. And if you don't have a solid foundation in yourself and you try to bend too much to the system, I definitely think that code switching can be that it can negatively impact you. So
And you said something like very important, which also brings us back to the imposter
yeah,
syndrome. Like you said, it took you a while to get there
mm-hmm.
to be able to stand in your
Yeah,
power. Like and how I'm interpreting it is that you had to go through some things, and then you had it was like a moment, because that's what it was for me. It's like, hold on, I applied and got here. It wasn't because my grandfather or grandparents were legacy or anything like that. What?
mm-hmm.
I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
I worked my butt off. I'm here because I deserve to be in this space.
Yeah.
And it's like a light bulb switches off, and when thine eyes have seen the glory, what a beautiful day it is.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And there's just a certain level of like confidence that you have, especially being a black woman, to be able to stand in that and be like, I'm here, right? Like I worked hard to get here, and that is my motto now. If anybody knows me personally knows, when it comes to these spaces, I choose not to stress anymore. And it's because it's like I try to be a very humble person, but it's like, bro, I spent X amount of years in school. I got 3 degrees, right? I got this job that I'm working at right now as all but dissertation, right? Which was a whole nother world. Like, I work to be here and I work to be in this space just like the rest of you. And I've gone my entire life being myself. And I'm not going to allow this environment to completely rip me and strip me of who I am at my core. And it's hard. It is hard to do. And I know that I have a bit more of a luxury, right? Like you work for your main job is working for the government. I work for a very fluid environment in academia, so that space is left for me. But there are many people who, look like us and they're working in these corporate America jobs and they don't have that flexibility, and it is mind boggling. And it is also it really impacts their self esteem. Like I had a person that I was talking to one time, and she was concerned about getting braids and going to work, right? Like, and I'm like, I don't have to, but at the same time, I do have to practice empathy because I understand that I'm in another space. So to me, that comes up as a negative, right? Where you're a black woman and you have to be concerned about putting braids in your hair because of what somebody is going to think about you at work. Like, that is annoying.
1000% agree.
Yeah.
And my cousin, who was conflicted at the beginning. She's an attorney in corporate America. And when I started wearing my fro out, like, I mean, I've been natural forever, but wearing my fro, and she's like, "Oh, I wish I could do that," and I'm like, "Do it," and she's like, "I can't." And then now in 2024, that was probably over a decade ago.
Yeah.
2024, she's finally had that light switch. I'm like, "You've been that girl."
Yeah. Yeah.
Now she wears her natural hair to work. Now she's okay with, like, this is me, right? And much of that is that we also, and to any doctors or any black women who are navigating this world, understand that everything that you have, you worked for.
Yeah.
Your colleagues may have been given something at some point.
Yeah.
You, as a black woman, me and my friends, we worked for everything that we got.
Yeah.
And when you work your butt off, you deserve to pop your SHIT.
Yeah, I say it.
Yeah. How you see fit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you need to be in community. You talked about our jobs being a luxury, but we have each other as a luxury as well, that speak the same language. I'm like, this, what you think about this? You like, yeah, where? You, Cydnee, what you think about this? Yeah, where? Okay, like I said, you challenged me with the nails. You know, I was like, I'm basic with when it comes to the nails.
Yeah.
Now I'm, doing a little design and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it matters
Hmm.
to not lose your creativity, to not lose your sense of self. And when the world is tearing you down, you need to get in community. Now, y'all, we welcome y'all, but like, that's my friend. I don't like sharing, so. But like, it's, seriously, and I think that we found other girls that we don't necessarily talk to all the time,
Yeah.
but we're definitely in their comments, we're in their DMs when they're posting like, girl, you look good, like the other fellow black doctors that we see. And that's community,
Yeah.
reminding each other to stand in your power. I see you, girl.
Yep.
I see you popping it. Keep popping it.
Absolutely. 8 down. I was just in somebody comment the other day who I don't even follow, and I think it was like a nurse and somebody was a psychologist. 8 down, right? Because again, much of this, even in our community, because there's always a fight for resources, a fight for positions, it sometimes puts us against each other. And we found that community is the best possible thing that you can have, especially being in the positions that we're in, right? So I want to, before we, wrap up, I want to talk more about, because you kind of like bridge the gap a little bit in between code switching and the work that you do, or the work that you've done in your dissertation. So can you tell us a little bit more about your research in literacy and how that can benefit some people? Because one of the missions of this podcast or of this space is to take all of the nerdy things we do, right, behind closed doors and in these dissertations and in these presentations, and break it down in ways that's easily digestible by people who are not going to get their PhDs, or by people who maybe just barely made it out of the bachelor's program or didn't go at all. But we want to be able to say, like, if we're producing this information for our community, we want to be able to give it to them. So just tell us a little bit more about some of the highlights of what you found as it relates to literacy in urban and Black and brown communities.
Well, first and foremost, I'm Queen Literacy. Okay. And I instantly thought about this. I don't know if it was on BET when we were younger, but there was like this little ad, and it used to be like, read a book, 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 read a book. And so, um, I want kids to read.
Yeah.
I want kids that look like me to have access to quality literature.
Mm-hmm.
I was working in a school district in Los Angeles, and they didn't have an on-site school library.
Mm.
That's foreign to me. Every elementary school in the state of Texas has a full library where the students go weekly, check out books. They have authors come and read to the children. There's an on-site librarian. When the librarian isn't there, they can teach them how to find books and just navigate the library.
Yeah.
I took that luxury for granted growing up, and I think a lot of people do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Educators included.
Yeah.
Moved to LA where these kids, they're like, oh, they're struggling to read, their reading scores are low. There's no library.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm walking around the school, I'm like, where's the library? Where's the library? Oh, we don't have one. But you wanted to know why the reading scores are poor?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do the kids have access to books?
Yeah. Yeah.
More so with my research, once I started doing, the teachers had their own like classroom library,
Mm-hmm.
and I started doing inventories of the libraries on the school campus. I didn't tell anyone. I just was curious to know, was I the only person where my kids are supposed to have 5 to 10 books in their book bag and they're only able to put 2?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Was I the only one where the books were falling apart from the seams?
Yeah. Yeah.
Was I the only one where the only books that we had in the library about Black or brown people were brown people as sharecroppers and Black people as civil rights activists?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're so much more than that.
Right. Very true.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I started saying, that's how my research started. You know, I've been doing reading education since the beginning of my college
Yeah. Yeah.
career.
Yeah.
So I'm really immersed in literacy and reading education. But I'm like, y'all want to know why the kids can't read? They don't. One, they don't have books.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Two, the books are falling apart. Who wants to read a? Oh, it doesn't bring excitement. It's raggedy. It's falling apart.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what's exciting about going and get a book that's missing pages?
Yeah.
And then what do I tell my students when they're like, Miss Patterson, my book is missing a page? And I'm like, oh Lord. So I started doing not GoFundMe, but the teacher one.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
The teacher portal where you
Yeah.
create fundraising
Mm-hmm.
just for books. I'm trying to get books for my kids, but I was very intentional. And then it made me start saying, well, I know that there has to be books with black characters that are not civil rights activists or slaves.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be books where the brown people are not just sharecroppers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There has to be more books with black authors. At the time, there was not many, actually.
Mm-hmm.
One of the books that I'm always thought to think about is Ada Twist the Scientist. And I remember finding that book and I was like, this is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So it was like a little black girl with her natural hair. And then it was Susie Perez for president. And it showed the little brown girl and she's running for president. But in like they're little kids,
Yeah.
and it's showing they're using their imagination to be all the things.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is what I need more of for my students.
Mm-hmm.
I have a plethora of children's books. Somebody would probably come to my house and be like, where are the children? There are no children here. Why do you have it? You know?
Yeah.
Um, but I'm building my child's library who isn't even here.
Yeah.
Um, but so literacy, what do we want kids to do? We want them to read.
Mm-hmm.
We have to make sure that they have books that look like them in front of them.
Yeah.
Again, not books that put them in places of oppression,
Mm-hmm.
not places where it's like a glass ceiling. They're looking at everything else happening around them, but it doesn't seem obtainable or real for themselves.
Yeah.
We have to look for authors who look like the students, right? Who are telling the stories of the students using the language of the students, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because in those books, what do we see? African American vernacular.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They can read that. They can comprehend it. It's not foreign. It's not going over their head. We talk about reading comprehension. It's not relatable.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
They can't comprehend it because it's not relatable. It's not that they have an understanding problem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's not relatable. They're not interested. They don't care. It's like speaking a foreign language.
Yeah.
So when we engage them in books that look like them, I know people say it all the time, but I gave some examples. When we engage them in books that look like them, that show kids going on adventures and using their imagination, right? They're now engaged. Now we're focusing on their comprehension. Now that fluency comes in because it's like native to them.
Mm-hmm.
That's their native tongue.
Mm-hmm.
How does that translate? Now when they're in those other books, those that are academic based or not, even if it's a book not using black characters or black authors, those same skills that they acquired from those books that look like them translate.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Makes sense. Makes sense. I love that. We talk so.
That was free game.
Huh?
That was free game.
No, it was. It was. And I think useful for not just educators, right? But useful for people in their homes too. You know, for parents, because one of the most important things that has to happen when kids are learning things is constant reinforcement, right? Constant reinforcement. And so in addition to what's happening in the school buildings, you need as a parent to be carrying some of that over in your home. And I get for some parents, books cost money, right? So we are going to go ahead and put that out there that a book is a resource, and a resource of any sort is going to cost something, right? And so for some people, books are not, readily accessible to them, but libraries are, right? And so maybe your school doesn't have a library, but there's a public library. checking out books in the library. But that is important. When you are a child and you're trying to develop a love for something, we can think of this as an adult, right? Like when you're trying to develop a love for something, it needs to be smooth. It needs to be relatable. I don't want to sit here and be reading about something that doesn't feel like it's connected to me, because this little boy or this little girl in this book is living in this environment and doesn't look anything like where I come from or anything like where I stay, or the words are different. I don't even understand what they're trying to say. So I love, highlighting the fact that representation in books matter, and pushing that narrative a lot more. We talk about it so much, but there needs to be action steps. And I would also say that it's important to highlight books, and there are a lot of Black and brown authors that post or that publish books on Amazon, because it's difficult to get publishing deals. So that's a whole nother world that we can talk about in a different day. But in order to see an increase in Black and brown scholars and writers, or Black and brown writers for these children books, sometimes people are going the avenue of only focusing on the books that they can get out of like a Target but on Amazon, there are so many books. I have a nephew. I've bought him so many cute little books from Amazon. And it's little, these authors that maybe nobody knows, but they're out there.
Yeah, for sure. And then another thing, like we did, like I said, I'm literacy queen.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have a library at this. We didn't have a library at the school in LA, but there was a library down the street.
Yeah.
And so my team and we worked with the library, scheduled for the and with parents, and we took a field trip to the library by foot. So now the students are walking through their community and then going to the library, but we didn't just go to the library. Before, people take tours of the library and all this stuff like that, but we left the library with something. Prior to them going to the library, they needed a permission slip and they needed the form signed that would allow them to be able to get a library card.
Makes sense.
So typically we worked with the librarian. We say, hey, we have the form. The parents won't be able to come in because it's during school hours, but this is what we want. We want our kids to be able to have books, blah, blah, blah. And when you start talking that language, and that's part of the code switching aspect, being able to speak the language that needs to be spoken.
Yeah.
Then you got that buy-in. So then the students were able to, and I have a video. I can share it with you, actually. I have a video on YouTube from, it's not where public can see it, but when we took our students to the library and they were able to get their library card, they were so excited and check out their library books, and we made it a big deal, right? So just like you said, like people like to make sure their kids are carrying a tablet. Swap that tablet for a book.
Yeah.
People like to be like, oh, he wants to read that same story over and over. Let them read it over and over, because what's happening is they're building that fluency.
Yeah.
I used to tell my parents that all the time. Fluency. They're getting more fluent with their reading over and over and over. Repetition, right?
Yeah.
It's like you said, any access to a book is good. A lot of times people don't consider environmental print, right? You can be driving in a car, you see Chick-fil-A, and or you go get your Chick-fil-A bag and you're with your kid and you're saying Chick-fil-A, right? They might not necessarily be at an age to sound it out, but that environmental print, understanding that words mean something.
That's a good tip too. That's a really good tip, because and I don't even know if you put this together, right? But it's the idea that it's okay if you don't have enough resources to have a library in your house and in your home, right? But there's words everywhere. And much of it is about like taking the time and the patience to use some of the things that are environmental that you have that are easy to grasp, right? We still need those books in the house, but you don't need 10, 20,000 of them, because that's the funny thing about kids anyway. They love a repeat. You tired, but they will read the same thing. They will look at the same thing over and over again. So just starting with 1 or 2 books in your home library, or checking out 1 or 2 books at a time, but also when you don't have the access to that, using real life things to kind of help them digest it. and taking away the tablets, right? Like, I know that we're in a world of AI. We are moving towards, technology based things. But the problem is that literacy is also tied to a social skill, right? Learning to read and reading comprehension allows you the opportunity to communicate in conversation in real time. The less kids are able to read and to develop those skill sets to understand language, the more likely they're going to struggle with their social skills of having conversations with people. So we're not saying don't use the tablets, right? We're not saying don't use the televisions and all of these things. They're great, but we're missing the fundamentals, and it's very simple. It's very simple.
Yeah, which prompted the name to my dissertation. What is a book?
Yeah,
Best practices to engage K through 5 literacy, for K through 5 literacy specialists to engage students in reading. What is a book?
yeah,
Because I don't want people to forget the power of a
yeah,
book, touching the pages,
yeah.
smelling the pages,
Hmm.
right? Like a book came out, you remember like going to the library and you could smell the
Yeah,
pages
yeah,
of the
yeah. You can
book.
smell the
You
lavender.
can touch it, like there's some sensory that goes on
Yeah,
when you're touching and feeling a book. On my shelf right here I'm in the kitchen above the sink. There are three books. One is my dissertation. The other is Barack Obama Promised Land and Becoming Michelle Obama. It again, where are the children? There are no children. But I'm practicing now that my children will see books
yeah,
in all the spaces of their life,
yeah.
right? Thinking about environmental print. I grabbed this Stanley. Everybody knows the Stanley, even the little babies,
Hmm.
right? They can be saying Stanley,
Hmm.
Stanley. Okay, here. Or, I want water.
Yeah,
Can you get my, you know, taking your time to be intentional, understanding that, like you said, words are all around us,
yeah.
and that is reading.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I love that, and I feel like we've gotten some great tips for people all across the board, right? Whether it's tips on managing that code switching, whether it's tips on figuring out how to increase best practices for literacy in the classroom, which the biggest thing that you highlighted today is making sure that the things kids are reading are resonating with them, that making sure that it's written in languages that they can process, and that it has pictures of people that look like them and that can help them aspire to be something, and also looking at digital or environmental footprints to kind of like increase that as well. I absolutely love it, love it, love it. And we could talk all day long about this if we wanted to. And I'm sure
Yeah.
there will be another time where we'll probably be back in this space again. But I want to say thank you so, so much. But before we go, because again, flash it in scholarship. So tell me, like, what's something that you're doing right now, and what is the thing that's playing in your speakers?
Oh my God. Okay. So something that I'm doing right now is cleaning out my closet, like Eminem said, because I think I'm still in post PhD,
Yeah,
PTSD,
yeah,
and figuring out what it's like to be human again. So I had clothes probably from 15 years ago that needed to go.
yeah, yeah.
And I'm doing that right now. But outside of that, I am really just loving me right
Mm-hmm.
now. Again, I said I'm a post PhD life dealing with the PTSD and finding out like what are the things that I like. And if I want to lay on the couch and do nothing, then I'm going to lay on the couch and do nothing. If I want to go to a concert, I'm going to Jasmine Sullivan's concert solo tonight. Like that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah,
So right now, I'm just doing things that give me the desires of that my heart desires,
yeah.
unapologetically and loving on me. It took a long time to get to this space of
Mm-hmm.
freedom. I feel like a load is off of my back and all the things that come with it. So that's what I'm doing right
I
now.
love it.
Um, in my headphones,
Yeah.
as of this morning, it was Jasmine Sullivan, "Let It
Oh,
Burn."
you trying to learn
Call
the
me
words
crazy,
before you
but
go tonight.
you're right. Call me crazy, but you think I found the love of my life. That's right. But outside of that, like, this is so funny. But I'm just gonna add this.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna add this. For some reason, there's this guy named Boston Richie, I think is his name, and he had this song called "Help Me," and I think it's just so funny. And it's like, "Baby, can you help me?"
Oh, I
Baby,
need to. You need.
that's all I got. I'll send it to you.
Yeah, because I'm like, I never heard of it, but I would love to listen.
Yeah, I'll send it
Drop.
to you. But I just know the chorus. So, baby, can you help me? That's my trap song when
Drop.
I'm in my car. When I
Drop it to me.
yeah.
Drop it to me. Well, Dr. Cydnee, it was so good to have you set the tone 100% for episode 1 and the futures. It was a great conversation. I'm so excited, and I thank you, thank you, thank you so much for taking your time out to be here. Tell the people where they can find you on the grams, on the things before we go.
Okay, thank you again. You can find me at Dr. Dot. I'm really laughing because the Instagram was a whole thing a couple of days ago. Um, at Dr. Cydnee, Cydnee Clarke, Clarke on Instagram, or you can use the hashtag THEE Fashionable PhD. Follow that Instagram page, follow that hashtag, and my website www.thefashionablephd.com.
Holla.
Look me up, follow me, call me, beat me if you want to reach me.
Here you go. Bye. See you later. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, friend. Anytime.